So we're at class 57 on Golden Dust, page 22. The major objection to nature was on semantic grounds. We were dealing with Rabbi David Yato, how in the days of Rabbi David Yato, we were beginning to understand the physical rules of the universe. We began to understand the universe as a clock. There are mechanistic elements to the universe where we can predict what's going to happen. The predictability of the universe is based upon those scientific rules which we understand and therefore can predict what's going to happen next. So this led to the concept of there being a mother nature, right? So there's a certain intelligence to the world, call it nature. Nature protects, nature has an intelligence and all that. So the objection to nature is on semantic grounds, meaning the interpretive function given, or the functional role of nature in Western thinking, namely that it's used to displace God, right? So if you mean nature just, as a, in an allegorical sense, I suppose it doesn't necessarily contradict the Torah, but people take it seriously. They believe nature is something that must be worshipped, right? So in itself, the term nature is neither bad nor repugnant to the holy laws of Moses. The Torah doesn't care whether you believe that there is a nature to the world, providing that he who utters it understands its true meaning. But you have to be careful with that. Because if you say there's a nature to the world, what do you mean by that? Do you mean in the sense that God doesn't govern the world? That God is not the source of the intelligence in the world? Is that what you mean by it? That's problematic. So it says Rabbi David Nieto. However, since not all who utter it understand it, what they're talking about when they say nature, they first form false ideas, and from them afterwards very harmful propositions which are contrary to the truth professed by Israel. Because when you begin to take the idea of nature beyond its allegorical sense, but you believe there's some sort of nature in the world, and nature explains the intelligence in the world, and nature explains why there's such a perfection and even a beauty in the world, then what you're doing is you're displacing God. A truth, and this truth, the truth of God, that Israel is prepared to uphold by risking property, children, and life. We are willing to give our lives for Kiddush Hashem when the halakha requires it. So our belief in God and our belief in there being a creator who now governs the world is so intense and so powerful that we will give up our lives to uphold that belief. So when you say, I believe in nature, you're actually kofer in Elohei Israel. If you mean it in an allegorical sense, you mean to say, there's some sort of intelligence to the world, and I call that nature. Well, okay, but it's a dumb attitude, because what you really should be saying is God's intelligence is incredible, and look what it does in the world. But instead you use the word nature. You use the word nature. I actually am a little more extreme than Rabbi David Nieto, or a little less tolerant of the word nature than Rabbi David Nieto. From these false propositions, later on, the idol nature was formed. Rabbi David Nieto himself understood the danger of nature, and he saw how it became a type of avodah zarah. So people now, they give homage to nature. We must destroy human civilization to protect Mother Nature, right? People must freeze to death in India because we have to stop fossil fuel emissions. And I'm not commenting on whether that does or doesn't affect the weather. That's an issue for other people to determine. But Mother Nature must be protected. And if it means the loss of human life and the people freezing to death in India or other places in the world, so be it, right? So that becomes a type of avodah zarah. Where man is denigrated and lowered to like some sort of low life form. And of course, nature is more important than man. According to Nieto, the Hebrews conceived of the universal providence in which God continuously repeats the first act of creation, rather than nature, which implies a totally passive God. So when you say nature, what you mean is there are certain rules that kind of repeat themselves, and nature is not actively looking out for every individual. For example, nature doesn't see an old lady about to cross the street and then it causes an earthquake to swallow the car that's about to hit the old lady who's about to cross the street. Nature doesn't do that. God may do something like that, right? Nature doesn't do something like that. So how do we conceive of the world? So they conceive of the world as these kind of like there's a clock that's kind of ticking, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Everything follows, this predetermined order. We don't do that. We don't believe in that. Right? Rather, we believe Hamehadesh betubo b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereshit. Every day, if the sun rises, it's because every day God is making the sun rise. Right? So we don't believe in nature. Right? I wrote an excellent article about this, and I say excellent because my father, Alav Hashem, really loved this article. It was in the Journal of Rabbinics. What was the article called? A Rabbinic Perspective on Quantum Mechanics. I really explained this idea in great detail. I highly recommend that article. If you want to WhatsApp me privately, I will send you a link to the article. And that article is based on a private class that my father gave to me on the subject, just so you know where that article comes from. The scriptures declare that at the end of creation, the Lord rested from his work which God created to do. וישבות ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה. וישבות ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה. What does it mean, vayishbot? So what do we say when we say God rested on the Sabbath? What does that mean, he rested? Nieto noted that the nominative agent of the sentence is God, right? Therefore, the literal sense of this passage is that God created so that he himself should do. That is, repeat. So, Asher bara Elohim la'asot. What does it mean, la'asot? What is la'asot? God created so that it will do. So that it will do, meaning that the universe will kind of repeat itself. No, that's not what it means. God created so that God will do. Meaning when God created the universe, he created certain norms in the universe, and God repeats these norms. Now notice the difference between Asher bara Elohim la'asot, so that the universe, so to speak, will do, which implies, a mechanistic view or some sort of clock, and then God is detached from the world. So you can say Asher bara Elohim la'asot means so that the universe repeats itself. And then you have the idea of nature, Mother Nature. Or Asher bara Elohim la'asot, so that God is the one who is oseh. And if God is the one who is oseh, there is no nature. But rather there is God doing this and repeating it and perhaps choosing not to repeat it. So for example, you have Shemesh Begiv Ondom. Shemesh Begiv Ondom, God chooses not to repeat sunset. But in this case, he stops the sun. Now if you have nature, then that would be disruptive. Well, what's disrupting nature? But nothing is disrupting nature. That's exactly the point. God makes the sun rise and makes the sun set, and God can, at the same time, for whatever reason, chooses not to make the sun rise and not to make the sun set. Some objected that to attribute to God the function of universal nature smacked of gross pantheism. So some people accused Rabbi David Nieto of being a pantheist, which of course nothing can be further from the truth. People love attacking. If you're just an average rabbi, you're safe. You probably won't be attacked. If you kind of repeat what everybody else says, you're safe. You probably won't be attacked. If you're brilliant and you actually have something new to say, chances are they'll attack you. It's just the way it is. Yeah, people are intellectually dull, generally, and intellectually dull people don't like to be intellectually stimulated because that would challenge their spirit, and people don't want to be challenged. People like to be in their dull state of mind. So when you have dull people speaking to them, they got, that's fine. They want somebody dull. The minute you say something brilliant, incredible spark of wisdom that comes from God, people get excited and they don't know what to do with themselves. Not everybody, but there are always going to be those dull people who find the idea of being intellectually stimulated just too much to bear. So in the case of Rabbi David Nieto, who was a brilliant chacham, this happened. It happened, by the way, many times with my father. People couldn't deal with his wisdom, or not everybody, but there were those rabbinic elements who themselves were intellectually dull and unsophisticated, and it was just too much for them to try to think of something amazing in the Torah, right? And that's fine for them. I'm not objecting, but I just want to be clear. I'm not objecting to those rabbis. They have a right to be boring and dull. That's what they want, and God bless them for that. But some people want something a little more intellectually stimulating, and some people believe the Torah is alive. Es Hagim, it's an ayas, it's constantly growing fruits. Rabbi David Nieto was one of those people. So Rabbi David Nieto obviously was accused by the less sophisticated and those who get, eye twitches because they heard something that they don't quite understand. So he was accused of pantheism. Right. Therefore, the opinion of Rabbi Tzvi Ashkenazi, the foremost Ashkenazic authority of his time, was consulted. Right? You always have to consult the rabbi, because one rabbi is posel, another rabbi, and we have to have another rabbi to tell us whether the first rabbi is kosher or not kosher. Is it OU? Is it glot? God help us. In a formal legal decision, Pesaki concluded that Nieto's position represented basic Jewish dogma. Rabbi Tzvi Ashkenazi was actually a great Talmid Chacham, the Chacham Tzvi, and he saw the wisdom of Rabbi David Nieto, and he himself had no problem with that. The fact that we have to, go to Chachamim, are we going to be posel this person? Will he burn in hell, not burn in hell? I honestly, I don't understand what all that is about. Well, actually, I do understand what it's about. It's a type of neurosis that we got from the Christian society around us. So I do understand what it's about, but I can't relate to it. Nevertheless, the Chacham Tzvi, who was himself a great Chacham, said, there's nothing wrong with the David Nieto. Why should there be something wrong with him? Right. In addition to the book De la Divina Providencia, Nieto also issued a legal decision defining another Chacham that they attacked was Rabbi Eliyahu ben Amozeh, because he was really incredibly prolific in his wisdom of the ancient sources. I really can't think of too many other Chachamim who had his incredible knowledge of archaeology, of Semitics, of ancient languages. I mean, it's really amazing. And then, of course, he was put into Chenem because, how do we deal with, that? And God help us again. Or his book was actually, I don't know, I'm sorry, Mechilah, maybe he wasn't put into Chenem. Maybe his book was, I don't even care, because to me it's all nonsense, but his book was haram. They outlawed his book, right? Somebody found in a footnote of one of his books that he says you have to eat cheeseburger on Yom Kippur. So they outlawed the book. That was a joke, by the way, for those of you who don't understand a sense of humor. Nieto also issued a legal decision defining the above-mentioned doctrine. He published it together with the Spanish version of Rabbi Tzvi Ashkenazi's reply, as well as with statements by the Parnasim in his work, Decision. Neither of these legal decisions was subsequently challenged by any rabbinic authority. Baruch Hashem, the rabbis finally decided to give up on attacking Rabbi David Nieto, but he published a Pesach on the question of nature, and no, we reject nature, but rather we believe God is governing the world. And just because God is governing the world doesn't mean we're pantheists. No, pantheism believes that there's a soul to the world, and that God is within the world. And of course, we don't believe God is within the world. Nobody said that. Means outside the world, right? Accordingly, they represent basic doctrine to both Ashkenazim and Sephardim, the two principal branches of Judaism, except Rabbi David Nieto's attitude towards nature, which is to say, no, we don't accept nature as a true force within the world. Rather, we believe God is governing the world and making things happen within the world, right? And we can say that and also reject the notion that God is the soul of the world. God is obviously, chas v'shalom, to say the soul of the world. The significance of this doctrine will become clearer upon considering the semiological and metaphysical views of the universe. So the next section will begin to look at the semiological view of the universe, the metaphysical view of the universe, and understand a little better Rabbi David Nieto's attitude towards nature. But that's in the next class.